I'm Margaret Brennan in Washington, and this week on Face the Nation, the midterm elections are just hours away, and candidates are spending the weekend barnstorming their states with some of the biggest names in politics. Democrats argue democracy is on the line. Republicans say the party in power is wrecking the economy. It's a mad dash to get out the vote, and the stakes are high as both parties vie for control of Congress for the next 2 years. It's all just ahead on Face the Nation. Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. The most important and probably most competitive midterm election in years is now down to the wire. More than 39 million votes have already been cast, and across the country, candidates are out in full force, hoping to persuade the persuadable, turn out their true believers, and perhaps their most difficult challenge, explain to people why this election is so important and why they need to vote. In their words, here is what it comes down to.
They came into office and they created the worst inflation crisis that we have seen in 4 decades.
The Republicans like to talk about it, but what's their answer? What's their economic policy? They want to gut Social Security. They want to gut Medicare. They want to give rich folks and big corporations more tax cuts.
Young couples want to make that first investment for a starter home. They can't afford the interest rates. We have families all over the Commonwealth worried about crime, so much so they won't send their kids outside.
Your right to choose is on the ballot. Your right to vote is on the ballot. There's something else on the ballot. Character. Character's on the ballot.
You heard them say the biggest threat to democracy is voting for the Republican. Are they serious? The biggest threat to democracy is having Joe Biden in the White House.
The main event is Tuesday. Control of the House, which has been shifting in Republicans' favor in these last weeks. They need 5 seats to take over, and control of the Senate, where just 1 turnover will put them on top. We are tracking 10 key battleground races, 5 of which are hotly contested toss-ups. Our Chris Van Cleve is in Arizona, our Nicole Killian is in Georgia, and our Robert Costa has been reporting in Pennsylvania, and that's where we begin this morning.
It's a choice between 2 vastly different visions of America.
It's a choice that's as competitive as ever. Right now, the Senate race between Republican Mehmet Oz and Democrat John Fetterman could not be closer. 3 presidents barnstormed the state this weekend.
If you want to stop the destruction of our country and save the American dream, then this Tuesday you must vote Republican in a giant red wave.
On the road from the campus of Penn State to the suburbs of Philadelphia, voters told us that the economy is front and center.
Are you feeling economic pain in your life?
Yes, I'm fixed income.
Fetterman, who is recovering from a stroke in May, says that voters who want to blame Democrats for inflation should think again.
What I would say to them is that you need a senator that is going to push back against corporate greed and the kind of price gouging as well, too. I mean, this is my point.
Oz has courted frustrated voters. Last night near Pittsburgh, he urged his supporters to win over neighbors by asking them if they're happy with the nation's direction.
I want you to contact 10 people. Do it at church. Do it before the Steelers game. Just find the time.
But the Pittsburgh Steelers don't play this week, and the remark gives Oz's critics another chance to claim he is out of touch.
This is Chris Van Cleve in Arizona, where both the Senate and governor's races appear to be in dead heats. Battling for his political life, Senator Mark Kelly rallied in Phoenix with First Lady Jill Biden.
Women have lost a constitutional right, and that is taking us in the wrong direction.
Republican challenger Blake Masters has closed the gap by hammering Kelly on the economy, crime, and the border.
Mark Kelly, Joe Biden, they've opened up our southern border. They've given our sovereignty over to the Mexican drug cartels.
Carrie Lake is a rising star in the Republican Party and one of 3 election deniers at the top of the state's GOP ticket. Democrats have seized on that.
Democracy as we know it may not survive in Arizona.
That is quite a statement that you are a threat to democracy.
I wonder what he'd call Hillary Clinton, because she's denied so many past elections, and she's already denying the next election in 2024. We have the right to question our government and our elections. It's called the First Amendment, and I intend to continue to use that right.
Her opponent, Secretary of State Katie Hobbs.
Kari Lake is focused on being as extreme as possible, whether it's the issue of abortion, whether it's the 2020 election.
Starkly different campaigns on a collision course over the future of Arizona.
I'm Nicole Killian in Georgia.
From the great state of Georgia, Herschel Walker.
It was a homecoming for Herschel Walker at the University of Georgia, where the former football star was game ready.
Just like the Dogs are going to win today, that's what's going to happen on Tuesday.
The way to have a voice in a democracy is to have a vote.
Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock and Walker are locked in a heated contest that could determine control of the U.S. Senate.
I'm here to tell you we've got the power, Georgia.
In the governor's race, it's a rematch between Democrat Stacey Abrams and Republican incumbent Brian Kemp.
Polls tell us that this is a tight race.
We need a big turnout on Election Day.
More than 2.5 million Georgians have already voted, a state record. But here in Cobb County, elections officials say more than 1,000 absentee ballots were never mailed, calling it a critical error. They blame overworked staff, but say that's no excuse, and they're working to contact impacted voters. Margaret?
Nicole Killian, Chris Van Cleve, and Robert Costa. Thanks to all of you. We turn now to Keisha Lance Bottoms, the former mayor of Atlanta. She now serves as a senior advisor to President Biden, but the White House tells us that this morning she's appearing only in a personal capacity. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
You said last month you were concerned about a lack of voter enthusiasm in Georgia, but the Secretary of State says there is a historic level of turnout. What does that signal to you now?
Well, I'm glad that people are turning out to vote. When I said that last month, I was sounding the alarm, and we have seen a record number of people turn out in early vote, but we still have an election on Tuesday, and we cannot let up until this election is over. I was on the ballot 5 years ago, 7 points down going into Election Day, and I won by less than 800 votes. It doesn't matter what the polls say. People still have the ability to show up to vote on Tuesday and to make a difference in Georgia. The thought of Herschel Walker going to the Senate is frightening.
That is a Republican candidate for the Senate. Black voters helped turn Georgia blue back in 2020 and send 2 Democratic senators here to Washington. How do you explain to black voters now who are so key in Georgia that they should help support the party, given that when Democrats held the majority for these past 2 years, top priorities like police reform and voting rights really haven't been addressed?
Well, we have to remember that there's been a very thin margin, but there have been a number of issues that have been addressed that impact not just African American voters, but voters across this country. Student debt relief, $10,000, $20,000 if you are Pell Grant eligible. A vast majority of African American students are Pell Grant eligible. There's also been a reduction in prescription drug costs. Insulin will be capped at $35 a month, $2,000 a month.
Starting in January.
Annually.
Absolutely. And the loans are, the student debt relief is caught up in the courts, and a part of dispute.
They are caught up in the courts because Republicans are pushing back against relief to American families across this country. African American voters are key in Georgia. 29% so far have shown up in early vote. That means that there are a lot of people left out there, not just African American voters, but voters across the state who can still show up on Tuesday and make a difference in this election. And that's what Democrats will need in Georgia for us to continue to send Raphael Warnock to the Senate and also to have Stacey Abrams elected as governor.
In our polling, we see consistently that it is the economy and inflation that are top of mind for voters. The president said just a few days ago that he has passed so many good things, but people haven't realized how good they are yet. Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin said the truth is Democrats have done a poor job of communicating our approach on the economy. DNC advisor Cedric Richmond, you know him well. He told CBS the president's message of what he's been able to accomplish has not gotten out there. Hillary Clinton just said the work done by Democrats is impressive, but we got to get that message across more effectively. If the policies are so good, why is communicating them such a problem?
Well, it's been a very difficult couple of years. We have been in the midst of a pandemic. There's been a lot of misinformation flooding the airwaves. We see it in ways not just on television, but we're seeing it through YouTube. We're seeing it on other social media platforms. So it is more difficult to get the message out. But I'm sitting here today getting the message out. This administration, Democrats in Congress, have delivered for the American people. And to turn back the clock and not allow us to keep pushing through will be devastating for people across America. If we want prescription drug costs to remain low, then we need Democrats in Congress. If we want voting rights finally passed in Congress, we need Democrats in Congress. If we don't want a national ban on abortion and for doctors and healthcare providers to be sent to prison for offering an abortion to a woman whose life may be in danger, then we need Democrats in Congress. And that's the message that we will continue to push out, not just through Election Day, but beyond, because we know that elections happen quite frequently, and we can't have people so discouraged that they think their votes don't matter.
President Biden said this week at a fundraiser, if Democrats do lose in the midterm, so he's entertaining it, is a real possibility. He said it'll be a horrible 2 years. The good news is I'll have a veto pen. Is complete gridlock what America needs to prepare for?
Well, we know that President Biden ran on being able to work across the aisle. So, of course, American people want us to be able to get things done. But when you have Republicans say that they will pull back aid to Ukraine, that their entire platform is based on doing what Joe Biden doesn't want done, that's not what the American people want. We want progress in this country. And we want leaders who believe in democracy. We don't want leaders who deny elections. I heard Carrie Lake say that people have a right to question their government. They absolutely do, but they don't have a right to overthrow their government in the way that we saw that on January 6th. So when you have election deniers who may go to Congress, who may be elected to statewide office, we have one in Georgia, Burt Jones, who's running for lieutenant governor, an election denier. That's not just a danger to Democrats, that's a danger to everyone who believes in what this country stands for.
Keisha Lance Bottoms, thank you for joining us this morning. We go now to Newfields, New Hampshire, and that state's Republican Governor, Chris Sununu, who is up for re-election on Tuesday. Welcome back to the broadcast. Governor, our public polling that we're looking at indicates that you're likely to keep the governor's seat after Tuesday. Back in 2021, you canceled your own inauguration due to security threats. You've personally experienced the threat of political violence. I'm wondering, how concerned are you in this moment now, and will you hold an inauguration if you win again?
Yeah. So a couple of things here. Obviously, with Speaker Pelosi and what happened recently, I think that is kind of everyone's kind of looking at what this political violence is. It's on both sides. It's everywhere. The heat is too high all across America. Good leadership brings that down. I'll be holding my inauguration, fully plan to do so. But again, we got to, as leaders, bring the temperature down. It's okay to disagree, but at the end of the day, you got to be able to move forward. And we fully plan to do that here in New Hampshire.
Okay. I want to come back to that topic in a moment. But first, inflation, it's top of mind. New England is facing its highest energy costs in more than 25 years. Could be a cold winter. Your largest utility in the region is asking the White House to prepare emergency measures to prevent a natural gas shortage this winter. What's the federal response been so far? And are you at the state level prepared for what could be a safety threat?
Yeah, I'll say the federal response so far has been very underwhelming. All the governors got on the phone recently, about a month ago, with the Secretary of Energy and tried to talk about what those opportunities were in terms of increasing natural gas. New England is really at the end of the line for natural gas, right? All of our natural gas comes through Albany. And in previous years, if there was a high demand or a big cold snap, folks come home, they turn their heat on, the Marcellus Shale would increase production. But no one's incentivized to do that. There's no opportunity to do that right now. And I think that's where a lot of the utilities, and rightly so, are telling this administration, you've put policies in place, It's having a very drastic effect on energy and fuel oil prices today, and likely is just going to get worse. So we need to see something across New England. There's nothing political about energy prices, right? But when you have all the ability in the world to produce your own fuels and refuse to do it, obviously folks in New England are quite frustrated.
Well, there's record production right now, as you know. But this is a very real problem.
Yes, and because of the Jones Act, because of the Jones Act, that is this antiquated 100-year-old union-driven policy that President Biden refuses to get rid of, we have very minimal opportunity to bring natural gas from even parts of our own country and land it right here in New England. So it's not just New Hampshire, it's Massachusetts, it's Maine, it's all of these states that are feeling record high prices because, again, we've shut down natural gas plants, we've disincentivized fossil fuels. Look, we all want to transition into renewables, and of course that's a very smart thing to do, but it must be a transition. This administration went all or nothing. So that's why you see it costs twice as much to fill your gas tank, your fuel oil, your energy prices. And in New England, when it gets cold, there's going to be some real pain for all of us. And again, we're just asking the administration to reverse some of these policies and incentivize more production and more natural gas through Albany, New York, to get us what we need.
President Biden, in one of his closing arguments, is framing this election as protecting democracy against extreme Republicans. Listen.
The extreme MAGA element of the Republican Party, which is a minority of that party, as I said earlier, but is this driving force, is trying to succeed where they failed in 2020, to suppress the right of voters and subvert the electoral system itself.
Do you agree that parts of your party are emboldening violence and posing a threat to democracy?
Look, what is shocking to me about all of this is you have the Democrat Party, which is now using the President of the United States, not as leader of our country, but leader of their party, as a political tool right before the election to drive and effectively tell half of America that they're too extreme for America.
You think the MAGA element of the Republican Party is half of America? Because I wouldn't necessarily put you in that half.
No, well, definitely not. But again, to say that extremism belongs in one party and it doesn't appear in the Democrat Party is nonsensical.
You're
Nobody
saying the party is all one now,
on both
unified.
sides.
That extreme MAGA is part of the Republican Party's ideology?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. No,
it seemed like that's what you're implying.
It's an absolute minority. But what I'm saying is extreme. No, definitely not. Extremism is on both sides. And for the President of the United States to come up and be more of a political tool as opposed to a uniter. Remember, he got elected because he said he was going to unite folks, not threaten them. He was going to bring everybody together and get stuff done and not polarize this country, which is exactly what has happened. Okay. If that was not the reality, then Democrats wouldn't be in for the rude awakening that it's going to come Tuesday. But it is coming. And not because of politics, because of what is happening in people's homes, what's happening at their kitchen tables, what's happening with trying to balance a checkbook. And the president has to take a lot of responsibility for that. It's easy to blame extremism, but most of us are not extreme.
Okay. Well, former President Donald Trump is expected to announce his candidacy for the presidency. CBS is reporting that could be within a matter of days. What does that do to your party? Does anyone have a chance of actually beating him in a Republican primary?
What does it do to our party? Nothing. Nothing. It'll have no effect on anything. And I mean that quite sincerely. First off, announcing you're going to run for office between an election and Christmas is a terrible idea, because one thing I can say for America is we're all going to be really happy one way or the other that the election is over come Tuesday. And everyone's going to want to take a breath and re-engage with their families and deal with some really serious issues. And then politics, really gets back into the mix of things in early 23. Whether the President Trump decides to run or not, it's not going to make any difference in terms of the fact that you're still going to see 8 to maybe even a dozen other candidates jump in the race. He doesn't keep anybody out of the race, right? So it's still going to be, I think, on both sides. I don't think President Biden is going to run again. I think on both sides of the aisle, you're going to have maybe a dozen individuals over the next 6 to 9 months come out and decide to run.
Well, and your name's floated as one of them, potentially. I know you're not going to give me an answer to that question right now, but you did turn down the invitation to run for Senate. Republican leader Mitch McConnell has voiced some concern about candidate quality in this midterm election. You told the Washington Examiner that the Republican majority would just obstruct President Biden until 2024. You didn't want to be a roadblock for 2 years. You're setting pretty low expectations for what a Republican majority would actually mean. Is that what we should expect? Just nothing for 2 years? Total gridlock?
Look, I think No, I think both sides of the aisle in Washington have set a horribly low expectation for Washington. I mean, think about it. They pass, one way or another, they pass a bill, Republicans or Democrats or both, and we cheer it. It's supposed to be this great success because they got something done. It is just an absolute gridlock mess there on both sides of the aisle. So as a governor, I can have so much more impact on what is happening on the ground level, redesigning systems, implementing better mental health services, implementing better opioid services, whatever it might be. And this is New Hampshire, and if you anyone who spends more than 10 minutes in New Hampshire knows not an easy place to leave. So I just want to get stuff done. If I'm going to put my family through the difficulties of public service and all that comes with it, I'm sure it's not going to get something done. And you can do that far more effectively as a governor than you can as a senator or a congressman. Now, leadership can change that. Leadership in Washington can absolutely change that on both sides of the aisle. And I think that's what America's looking for.
All right. Sounds like we'll be talking to you again, Governor. Thank you for your time today. Joined now by Chris Krebs, former director of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. He's a CBS News expert and analyst. Good morning to you, Chris. Good to have you back. How do you react to this idea of President Biden characterizing the MAGA element of the party as an extreme threat to democracy?
The area that I'm most focused on right now is the undermining of the legitimacy of American elections. And Governor Sununu mentioned leaders need to stand up and speak truth to power, and particularly the elements of the GOP that continue to repeat countlessly debunked claims. I mean, we even have the GOP candidate for governor, Carrie Lake, in Arizona just the other day making a joke about there's no way that President Biden got 81 million votes. In fact, he got more than 81 million votes. But the point here is that we do need leaders like Governor Sununu to stand up and say that this is not acceptable behavior in American democracy, and that we need those that continue to push these narratives for clout, for political influence, for money, for fundraising, that they need to let it go, and we need to move on if this American experiment is going to continue. Well,
we're going to continue this on the other side of that. But just to your point, there are 308 Republican candidates who have raised doubts about the integrity or validity of the last election. They're standing for office now. There's a reason they are using that as a political message. We're going to talk about that in a moment. So stay with us on Face the Nation. We return to our conversation now about election security with CBS News cybersecurity expert and analyst Chris Krebs. Chris, I want to talk about something that's happening right now. Social media has already changed the way we communicate, and certainly our political world. President Biden said a few days ago that he has concerns about billionaire Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter. He said the platform spews lies all across the world. There's no editors anymore in America. There are no editors. How do we expect kids to be able to understand what is at stake? It's not just kids, right? What concerns do you have about this happening just days before the election, these changes to Twitter?
Well, I think the government, for one, has a mechanism by which they can review the acquisition. The Committee for Foreign Investment in the United States can take a look at particularly the second and third ownership positions in Twitter, including Saudi Arabia. That is something that I'm assuming that the Treasury Department is taking a look at right now, see if they can put in place a national security agreement or even potentially unwind the purchase. But I think more specifically to what's happening right now with Twitter, I think there are two Elons that we're seeing. There's the public Elon that's trolling and saying $8 please on all the complaints about some of the shifts in the moderation and other activities. Then there's what's happening behind the scenes, the conversations with civil rights groups, with advertisers, with the teams, which perhaps may be a little bit more stable. And I think if you look at the platform itself right now, not a whole lot has changed. That may not be a popular opinion, but I think the reality is that you haven't seen too much of a change in the moderation. Now, the concern, though, is what happens tomorrow, where you can buy the blue tick for $8 a month, the Twitter Blue.
For our viewers who don't use Twitter,
right,
a blue check is a sign of credibility.
It has historically been a marker of trust in that Twitter has said, we have confirmed and authenticated the identity of this person, which tends to be a politician or a news media personality, or a journalist, an academic, or someone that may be a popular voice in certain civil rights, civil liberties issues.
Now you can buy it for $8 a month.
And along with a number of other features of editing and longer form video posting. But again, to have such a dramatic shift in that marker of trust, now you can buy it, in advance of, as we've been talking about, a very contentious and important election. It opens the information space to a broader community of influencers, clout chasers, election denialists. And
foreign actors?
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen reports lately of Russia, China, and Iran back at their old tricks. And it is going to create a very chaotic environment.
To that point, in 2018, during the midterms, Cyber Command took offensive operations to take out Russian trolls who were spreading misinformation. The New York Times has a story today saying Russia's back at it. What does that say to you about U.S. defenses?
Well, I think, so Recorded Future and Graphica, two research firms, have released information that Russian bots, trolls associated with the Internet Research Agency, which is a group that targeted the 2016 and the 2018 election, are back at it and are undermining, this time, Democratic candidates for Senate in some of the more contentious races. I think what it says is that there's a broader community of actors. They recognize that political discourse is very divisive here in the U.S., and they have more opportunities, probably than ever before, to continue to undermine confidence, to create chaos, which is really their primary objective here, is not necessarily that a winner wins, but that we've all lost confidence, and they degrade the American democracy experiment.
There are also a number of sitting senators, and of note, Ambassador Richard Grenell, former President Trump's acting director of national intelligence, has been posting some misleading information, that's him on the screen, about the election. He said any state which doesn't count all the votes and announce the winner Tuesday night is incompetent. Now,
so all 50 states, then, by that formulation?
Because what you're saying is just the fact that votes are never finalized on election night. But why do you think someone who knows better is posting something like that?
Well, whether he knows better, I can't assume that. But the point here is that it's for clout chasing. It's for influence. There is a reward system and structure set up right now within the far right of the GOP that provides additional engagement. So you tweet something like that, and you can see your likes, your retweets, your amplification really take off. And if you're just talking about some other, more mundane domestic issue, nobody cares. But there's a reward system and incentive structure that's set up where exactly this sort of messaging is rewarded. It's encouraged. And this is, again, going back to Governor Sununu's comments. We need leaders to lead. We need the presumptive leaders of the Republican Party to stand up and say, this is unacceptable. This is not how it works. We need to be good faith actors in this process. And unfortunately, leaders aren't leading right now.
Chris Krebs, thank you as always for your analysis. And we will see you on election night as part of CBS coverage at our democracy desk here at CBS News.